Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are watching African Hour. My name is Fru Nkimben. I'm host and producer of African Hour here in Boston, Massachusetts. African Hour has been on the air since 2000. We bring guests for them to share their knowledge and wisdom with my audience. Today's episode of African Hour is unlike any other one that I have hosted for the past more than 20 years. When you talk of Africa, you can only understand Africa when you mention Mount Kilimanjaro. I would liken my guest tonight to Mount Kilimanjaro. My brother, Professor PLO LUMUMBA, coming to you from Kenya. Prof, you are very welcome on African Hour.
Thank you very much, my dear brother. I'm glad to be with you this morning, this afternoon, this evening.
Okay, and then also, when you go to the West Coast in the Cameroons, you will think of Mount Cameroon.
Yes, indeed.
Other guest coming to join Professor Lumumba is my brother, Dr. Edmond Folefak, who is a medical professor at Ohio State University here in the U.S. Professor Folefak, you are welcome on African Hour.
Thank you, Fru Kimbeng, and it's a singular pleasure and a privilege for me to share the same platform with my icon and my brother and mentor in many things, Professor PLO Lumumba.
Professor Lumumba, thank you very much for gracing African Hour. I would like to say African Hour is not responsible for the views and ideas of my guest. Our distinguished guest, Professor PLO Lumumba, coming from the mother continent, Africa. We are honored and blessed to have you and Dr. Folefak from Ohio State University. Prof, welcome to African Hour. To begin, I would like to give 1 minute for each of you to address my audience. They want to hear from you.
If you permit me to begin, let me say how glad I am speaking to you at a time when Africa is going through a very painful period, if you may, and an interesting period at one. Painful in the sense that the continent is suffering from pain. Pain in Sudan, pain in Eastern Congo, pain in Central African Republic, pain in Southern Cameroons, in Ambazonia, pain in parts of the Sahel, pain in Somalia. But even in the face of that pain, we see certain positive in Namibia, in Botswana, in Ghana, in Mauritius, and in the Seychelles. It is what may be called a tale of two cities, if we are to borrow from that analogy. And in the midst of this apparent pain, we must never lose hope. It is our duty to make our continent great again, because she was once great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for those words of wisdom. You have actually set the stage for us to begin. Dr. Folefak, over to you in Ohio.
Well, it's hard to, I think you put me in a very difficult position to go after Prof. And, but, having been here now in the US for these many years that I've been here, and have the opportunity to get an education in some of the best institutions in the world and, rostering at those institutions. I think one of the things, as the Prof just mentioned, one of those painful places, unfortunately, happened to be my birthplace, the Cameroons, and by extension now, the tragedy that is unfolding to engulf not only just southern Cameroon, but the entire Cameroon, and by extension, probably the entire Central Africa region. But having had the chance to have been here for all this while and learning what I have learned here, I just want to remind people that there is really no difference between your intellectual capabilities with the intellectual capability of anywhere. As I always put it, it turns out that people, intelligence and stupidity are randomly distributed. And so societies that would grow are those that put their intelligence people in charge, their moral people in charge. And societies that would decay, like some parts of Africa where we're just mentioning, the flip is very, very true. You have the stupid people in charge, you have the immoral people in charge. But Africa's real challenge is how do we change that and get our moral people and our intelligent people in charge so we can meet up with the rest, catch up with of the world, and become even greater. As I've said, that we were once great, and at heart, we are always great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Folefa. Thank you. I want to assure my audience that you are listening to African Hour, coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. And our guests are the eminent and erudite Professor PLO LUMUMBA, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya, and Dr. Folefa, coming to you from Ohio, USA. I would like to take this opportunity again, Prof, to thank you for your precious time. You have spoken very, very passionately about Ambazonia and Southern Cameroon, and also spoken about Pan-Africanism. So the question is that how do you support Ambazonia and being a Pan-Africanist?
That is a very relevant and legitimate question. And some people think that is a contradiction and a paradox at once. In my mind, there is no contradiction, there is no paradox. Many times, unity not only demands but calls for what I describe as self-determination. If you look at countries that have been stable, which have problems of different ethnicities, they have accepted self-determination, because self-determination allows the people to actualize themselves and also to express themselves within a diverse community. And I'll draw from Switzerland. Switzerland is a country that was in conflict in the 19th century, and the people then said, why are we fighting? We are persons of German origin, persons of Italian origin, persons of French origin, persons of Romanic origin. They said, let us recognize all these as components of our whole, and let us now create a country that gives pride and of praise to all these. That is how the cantons in Switzerland were created. That is how the government in Bern was created. And Switzerland is now a point of reference to many countries in the world in terms of dealing with ethnicity. The same can be said of a few countries in Scandinavia. If you go to Finland, there's a sizable Swedish population, and they are given their pride of place within the Finnish environment. In the same way, in Sweden, there is a sizable Lap population. The problem in Africa is that we allow ourselves to be defined linguistically. So you talk about British or English-speaking Cameroon, French-speaking Cameroon. That is an external eternal definition of who we are. But even if you come to recent history, we know that what we now call Ambazonia was colonized by the British. And we also know that there was a German presence at one time, and then the French came in. What we are therefore saying is to have an arrangement that allows for people to express themselves. And rebellion is the language of the unheard. If the government of Cameroon was to listen to the people, then there would be an arrangement of a federal or confederal structure that would allow people to express themselves. And when people express themselves, then they become a stronger proponent of unity. So in my view, any person or any peoples within the continent of Africa who want to express themselves must be allowed to do so, because it is in expressing themselves that they'll become stronger members of the greater union of Africa. But if you don't allow them to express themselves, then they become disruptive to the detriment of Pan-Africanism. And history is consistent. History tells us self-determination must never be killed. It must never be abandoned. It must never be undermined. Because if you undermine it, you create a dangerous ground for chaos.
Prof, each time I listen to you, I feel like I am in a class. Thank you. And
Thank you.
This is really, I would say, a discussion among brothers, Africans. And thank you very much for that wisdom. And I speak also for my audience, and I know that they are also very, very appreciative of you taking your precious time to talk to them. Prof, recently, well, we are on African Hour, and it is not about a particular country. It's about Africa. Recently and currently going on, there is a G20, and there are sarcastic statements made elsewhere that the G20 has become the G100. And I listened to President Ramaphosa of South Africa. His response was very, very powerful, very, very African, and he spoke in parable, just like a true African. Prof, what do you say with that picture and that characterization of the G20 becoming the G100 just because it took place in the continent?
Africa is always in the periphery of things. It is in the periphery of the UN, which was created in 1945 when all African countries were under colonization, save for Liberia and Ethiopia and Egypt. So that when the charter was agreed upon in San Francisco in 1945, Africans did not participate. When the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was accepted in Paris in 1948, we were not there. When the Geneva Conventions of 1949 were accepted, most African countries were not there. When the G7 parades itself, Africans are not there. Even when the G20 meet, Africans are only there by way of a token. Now that the G20 are meeting in South Africa, it is being derided, particularly by the Westerners and the United States in particular. And Cyril Ramaphosa is talking for what has been described as the global South. That if you look at the demographies today, 1.5 billion in Africa, 1.3 billion in China, 1.4 billion in India. That is the world. If you look at Latin America, you look at Brazil, and in those places you find persons of African descent who are numbering anything between 300 and 350 million. And Cyril is therefore telling the conceptuous, your time is up. And the sooner you realize that your time is up, the safer you are. Because as Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe once famously said, there is only one race, the human race. And Africans are saying that ours is the cradle of human civilization. And even if you want to look at it from an economic standpoint, without being romantic but being realistic, the sooner you recognize us, even without dividing us into G7 or G20 or whatever G's you are talking about, the safer you are. And the sooner the world listens to Africa, the safer the world will be.
Thank you very much, Professor Polifak. I see you want to come in, please.
Yeah, I want to just add something to some meat to some of the things that you're raising. Prof, even when we talk about 1.5 billion people in Africa, if you are looking at the population of the Western world, it's an aging population, right? So if you really want to talk about the future and talk about the youth population, it's in Africa, right? So that this is where the most are. And really, so it's not just about America itself is growing today, thanks to a lot of the foreign, immigrants who come in, and the immigrants who are coming, especially the young, because it takes 3 young people to take care of 1 old person. Japan is finding out this the hard way. Most countries in Europe and in finding this out the hard way. Spain is now beginning to import, figure out how to allow labor to come from Africa. And so Africa must know that it is not just the number in terms of just 1.5 billion, which by itself is no mean statistics, but out of the 8 billion. But that when you talk about the functional the functional population, it's in Africa. And this is the point that I just wanted to add to all the other things that Prof has just said. And for the people who say this G100, I think the last I checked, South Africa's economy is probably the 41st or 42nd in the world, right? So the fact that they are telling you about G100 and making you deriving you, it's because it's really always, as they say, maybe we're subhumans. You have the people here who think that, I think our president here didn't even show up, right? Mr. Trump did not even show up, right? Because according to him, this is actually probably, why would he show up if he called that country shithole country? If he calls Africa shithole countries. So the Africans themselves must reclaim their identity and not be told their narrative. Not be told a narrative. And I think I just wanted to add that, to some of the things, to most of the important things that Prof has already laid out.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think to echo what Prof has said, President Ramaphosa said it is about inclusiveness, the Ubuntu spirit. Elsewhere in the West, they talk about Ubuntu just throwing it around, but they don't really practice what Ubuntu is. And that happening in Africa is very demonstrative, not only in words, but practical. Prof, one thing that I think Dr. Folefak, you will chime in this, and then Prof will say your own opinion, that in Cameroon, growing up in Cameroon since the 60s and when we federated, everything has been in French. The president has never really articulated a state speech in English. Even our majority of the Francophones, most of them who come here in the States, they are finding it very, very difficult that they had an opportunity in Cameroon to speak English. But recently, after October 12th, the election, the president-elect has been in the airwave, English, English, English. Is he catering or is he flattering the English-speaking Cameroon, or is what do you see, Prof? Because I am confused here.
There is a sense in which, and Samora Machel said it very well, that it is wrong to compare colonialists to say that one is better than the other. But the French were some of the worst in terms of their assimilation, because the French method of colonization was designed to convert their colonized peoples into French men and women. So right now we are in a world where the French influence is diminishing in the Sahel, in Central Africa, in different parts of the world. And they are beginning to believe that English is the language of commerce and culture in the world, and also to be attractive to Ambazonia, which commentators have described as the English speaking part of Cameroon. This is a way to massage their egos, but we must not allow, the Ambazonians must not allow themselves to be hoodwinked by that kind of rhetoric. The question is, are they allowed to self-determine? Are they allowed to have the education that they deserve? Are they allowed to have the health system that they deserve? Are they allowed to have the governance system that they deserve? Are they allowed to express themselves in the manner that they want and deserve? So rhetoric must not be allowed to hoodwink the people in Ambazonia. It is action that is going to change the equation, not merely mouthing English, English, English.
Well, Dr. Folifak, and the president-elect was once the former minister of information for Cameroon, and he never really addressed the Cameroonians in English. So right now, everything is out in everything is in English. So what do you take of that?
Like Prof said, you got to separate out what is perfunctory, what is performance, pure theater, from what is actually substantive. You know, the substantive thing is if that speaking that English means that you have recognized the value of the people in southern Cameroon's Amazonia, then that is a beginning. But if you are speaking the language in the way that it's actually just mere used to cajole, somebody would give a toy to kids, to play with. And then really that is actually the worst of the worst, right? Kinds of deception. But my view is that the Mr. Chiroma himself, His Excellency President Chiroma, as would call him now. I mean, I refer to him as who's the president-elect, bona fide, the legitimate president-elect of that country. I think that being a student of politics, he has actually looked at Cameroon and studied Cameroon, and realized that in the 1950s, if you realize, the UPC actually fought a vicious war of independence. I mean, a war of independence where the French actually committed genocide, and very recently admitted. And their fight was to be part of those, the Kromas, the Lumumbas of the world, who were thinking about true independence rather than flag independence of Cameroon. And these people were eventually suppressed thanks to the brutal and devilish, inhumane tactics of the French. Now you go back and then you come back, and in 1961, Chiroma also realized that the southern Cameroons was hooked into this ill-fated union with La République du Cameroon. And our people were going there thinking they were going there with intention, I mean, to form a confederacy where that self-independence, I mean, that self-determination would remain, but they could collaborate at the level of commerce, and foreign policy and all whatnot, and maybe national defense. You walk there, that's changed from going there and Ahidjo through the machination of the French, using that to deceive the people and immediately, take control of the Cameroon, dissolve everything about, our own self-governance, things about us, our culture, trying to assimilate. And there came, through 1972, where they took it from quote unquote Federal Republic to a union, and then to when Bia actually ultimately in 1986 assimilated,
But
walked through and assimilated the whole process, completed the assimilation by just reverting back to the name that La République du Cameroon had. So in their mind, the thought the assimilation has completed. And Mr. Chiroma has watched once and said, hey, again, you cannot create a stable structure in an unstable platform. So I think Mr. Chiroma is now beginning, was actually, if you followed his political agenda, if it was not rhetoric, he was saying, I want to go back and actually bring back Cameroonians, and that would include Ambazonians, to the table so that we could go back, relook at 1950s, the 1950s, 1961, 1972, all these misstep, and think about how could we work, look about all these mistakes of the future, and then recreate something that we really want for the future. And this is why I think, maybe this may be the noble reason why he is speaking English, to really be able to like tell the people, I get it. I get it. And like Prof said, it's
I really want to take this moment again to thank from the foot of Kilimanjaro to the foot of Cameroon Mountain. I want to thank our ancestors, because we as Africans, we always pay homage to our ancestors. Nothing goes this smooth.
Absolutely.
Nothing goes this smooth without me paying homage to our ancestors. And Prof, you've always said, and I believe in you, that we Africans are spiritual. So with that same doctrine that you are preaching, that for us to always pay homage to our ancestors, I like to thank the gods of Kilimanjaro in the east, to the gods of Cameroon Mountain on the west, for actually blessing this conversation. We have about 10 minutes to go, but Prof, I have one more question here, which says that considering the increasing interest shown by some African Americans in relocating to the motherland, would it not be worthwhile for Professor Lumumba to pursue or encourage the pursuit of ventures in institutional framework that encourage skills of African descent to get more reconnected with Africa and help impact positive growth in the continent? Could Professor Lumumba consider liaising with billionaires like Dangote to finance such a project?
In fact, the truth is that we are already doing that. We are already in touch with persons of African descent, not only in the United States of America, but in the Caribbean and in different parts of the world. And we have, as early as the year 2018, have persons of African descent visiting Ghana. We have visited Malawi. We have visited Somaliland. We have recently visited Burkina Faso. We are planning visits in Liberia and in different African countries. And we hold the view that the time is now for Africans to pay their way. And when you mention individuals such as Aliko Dangote, and indeed there are many others, and even amongst persons of African descent, it is important that we pool our resources together. On the 30th day of December, there's a young African-American lady called Wakesho, operating under the banner of Return to Eden, holding a conference in Nairobi for persons of African descent. And we hold the view, which view we hold to be legit, that we must put our money where our mouth is. We must have a skin in the game. and give meaning to the words of Malcolm X, who said, until the day that the African continent is respected, no person of African descent, wherever they are, will ever be respected. Through our own initiatives now, we have Pan-African Institutes in Nairobi, we have Pan-African Institute in Somaliland, we'll be opening one in Lusaka in Zambia, thereafter in Liberia, in Monrovia, and we are already doing something about it. And the beauty is there is a new renaissance, there is a new awakening, and persons are beginning to move in the right direction.
Thank you, Prof. While we wind down, Dr. Folefak, you want to say something?
Prof, you forgot to talk about the Pan-African in Ambazonia, right?
In Ambazonia is coming sooner rather than later.
Okay.
I cannot. If it would be that would be my practice. If I am working so hard to get these things up and up everywhere else, and be with you, and there is none in Ambazonia. This will be my practice, right?
A second motion.
But yeah, and I think that we want a Wakanda, right, forever, right? I mean, once we have a Wakanda in Africa, then to just quote from this movie, right, Black Panthers, you have a Wakanda in Africa, everything else follows, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, Prof. To our adult population, what are real examples of neo-colonialists and tribalists who, after inviting you and clapping to everything you say, have actually abandoned their attachment to colonial and tribal identity to become true Pan-African in practice?
There are many things that are happening, and this is when we talk about abandoning these processes, is not an event.
Yeah.
It is a process, because the colonial project was devastating. It affected our minds. It affected our art. And I see things happening as I travel across the continent of Africa. I see young men and women beginning to do things that tell me that they are beginning to decolonize their mind. They are not, it may not be dramatic, but there are things that are happening. They may not even be things that are visible at the state level, but they are beginning to happen in villages and hamlets. So those who want to see the Titanic turning suddenly will be victims of doom and gloom. But those who know that the Titanic is turning, but turning slowly, will not be discouraged. So things are happening. And I see it when I travel across continents.
Prof, from Nairobi, Kenya, in the mother continent, thank you very much for your time. But I would like you, Prof, across the continents and the Africans who are in the diaspora, the young and the old, they would want you to say something, a bridge that can connect these two groups together, because there is an economic power in the West and knowledge, and also the resources back at home. And someone, a young man or an old man listening somewhere in Africa, he would say, everything, you are very good, you people, you talk too much. Give us some ideas as to how we can connect these bridges that would enable us back here in the mother continent not to be looking for gold and silver out there when gold and silver diamond is under our feet.
There's no shortage of people who are skeptical, and skepticism is necessary. There's no shortage of people who are doubting. But let them come to the continent, see what is happening in Liberia, where we have young men and women beginning to engage in clothing. Let them come to different parts of Africa, see people doing agriculture. Let them come to the continent of Africa, see people engaging in artificial intelligence. And what we are asking for, be with us. Give us the benefit of doubt. And we who are in the mother continent are beginning to engage in activities that are changing people's lives in villages and hamlets. Talking, we will continue to talk because in the beginning there was the word. So the word must be spoken. What we are saying, let the words of our mouth be wedded with the actions of our hands. And we are doing it. And we are doing it across the continents in the knowledge that we have no less than 350 million people of African descent to be found in America, to be found in Latin America, to be found in the Caribbean, to be found in Europe and America. And there is a movement towards the mother continent. We must do it. Others are doing it. We have no other way than to do it.
Dr. Folifak?
I think that talking, just following up on what, but I'm privileged to be part of that process and to have been there severally in the continent with Prof putting down some of these institutions, mentoring, a lot of the young kids and a lot of people. And you can look back and then you see with gratitude that some of it is bearing fruit, right? I mean, you are seeing some of these people do wonderful things. I think the problem that we see is, yes, the wealth of the African diaspora is almost as big as the GDP of Africa currently in the trillions of dollars. And really, our challenge is how do we, connect those two such that people can take some of what they learned here, just not the money, but also the knowledge. And then when they go back, they try to change, not changing in the mental, they don't carry the American or the British in them, but they carry an African in them who has actually learned other values from other societies that make those societies grow. Example is China. You can take China for instance. Um, the West, there is this misconception out there, let's dispel that myth that knowledge is here. And that as almost if God, or as for the people who state God created mankind, and that creation endows some people with knowledge and some with stupidity. No, it never happened. I mean, before there was Timbuktu, there was no Harvard, there was no Oxford. I mean, that was usually the center of learning. Alexandria, so a lot of the what was catered from us and taken and then used to build a lot of some of the things that we see here. If you are here and you are taking this knowledge back to go and invest home, it is the ethical thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. This is what Chinese did. Chinese actually now, a couple of years ago, I mean, not less than 40 years ago, I mean, anything China was synonymous to what? And then China was synonymous to fake. So inferior. But is there anybody out there now who can still talk about China in those terms now? No. So this is what Africans need to do. And we just need to be able to allow to get, when I see what the young men in Kenya specifically did, I was so happy when they stood up and then forced the governments and the people, elected people, to say, no, you must actually listen to us. Many of them died, but really, it moved the needle. It's going to get to a point where that permissive environment is created such that it would allow many of the people that are here, many of us here, and some good friends of Africa who are of any color, as Prof said, there is only one human race, who would then take this and then invest and create more value in Africa. We're sitting in the best piece of real estate ever given by God to mankind. Prof can sit like the way he is there now for the entire year, right? I go there sometimes and then they will say it's winter. I'm like, where is the winter? But think
There's no winter. There's no summer. It's all summer.
It's always
all
summer.
good.
Yeah. But think about how we live here. At this point of the year, very soon, you cannot get out of your house, right? So why can we not go and invest in the place that help us create help us actually be. And this is why I'm beginning to, all the students I mentor here, I'm saying you must find a partner in Africa that you write project together, that you look together. But that project is not you dictating to him or her what to do, but it is him saying, okay, this is the problems we have. How do we solve that problem? Right? Because after all, that is what education is all about. And we must change our education system to become a functional education system, not still continuing to get the education system that was meant to use to colonize us, to train us to be scribes. So that sometimes when you hear all these big titles, doctor, professor, and stuff like that, you kind of like, at the end of the day, it's mere titles. It's no longer, it's not, there is no functionality behind that education. Here are our challenges. You know, we must become social engineers, meaning not social mechanics, not continue to be social mechanic. The difference between a mechanic and engineer, the mechanic continue to fix one particular machine. The engineer comes around and say, hey, we need something different. You know, we used to drive with cars. An engineer was that the mechanics were about fixing those cars, the same models. The engineer comes around and says, no, 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 but how can we fly to Kenya? And how can we go to Kenya? We can't drive to Kenya. So you design a plane. So this is what Africans need. And we have the tools to be able to do that. So I feel very optimistic. I'm happy I could talk about this for the rest of the day. But I would let Prof have the final word so we can actually like let him go to bed.
Yes. Prof, before you end, our discussion has centered on Africa, not on any particular country in Africa. And I would like, Prof, to look at this map. How long will it take, or what will it make for us to have a borderless Africa?
You know, that map that you have behind you is the product of Berlin in 1884 to 1885. Unfortunately, we have remained prisoners of these borders. Efforts have been made over the years. In 1963, Kwame Nkrumah said these borders should be dissolved, repeated in 1964 in Cairo, thought they would be dissolved in Accra in 1965. We now thought that after Africa Continental Free Trade Area and Africa Agenda 2063, they would be dissolved. There are people who are prisoners of these borders, but I hold the view that we must give meaning to the words of our founding fathers and mothers and dissolve these borders so that they become only signals and signs of administration rather than impediments. And that will come when we allow free movement of peoples. That will come true if we allowed our airspaces to be free. That would be possible if we ensure that we eliminate all tariff and non-tariff barriers. And the beauty of it is that all these have now been recognized under things such as Africa Agenda 2063 and Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Africa's problem is that we don't give meaning to what we say with our mouths and through declarations and treaties and all the other things. Work must be done. Efforts must be made. It is not for the faint-hearted. We have to work at it, and work at it we will.
Thank you, Prof. I would like to urge my audience that if you are watching and you have any questions or comments to make, please send it to African Hour 2023 at gmail.com. African Hour 2023 at gmail.com. What a blessing and an honor to have our distinguished guests, the Professor PLO Lumumba. It is night in Kenya, and
yes, indeed.
I could not really thank you very much, but I would like you, Prof, to give a final word to uplift and to lift my audience with, because as I said, your voice and your wisdom rings, echoes in my mind. Or if you could leave us a message.
I leave you with these words, paraphrase from Julius Kambarage Nyerere. It can be done. It will be done. Play your part.
And you have heard that call from our distinguished, erudite brother, Professor PLO LUMUMBA, coming to us from Nairobi, Kenya, in the mother continent, overshadowed by Mount Kilimanjaro. And then to Dr. Edmond Folefak, here with me in the land of America in Ohio. I am here in Boston, Massachusetts, and I want to thank my guests, and I want also to thank my audience and say you have been and you will always be an asset for African Hour. So long and good night.